Hello guys, welcome to part 2 of how to make a 3-stone ring. In part 1 I covered how to make your center stone bezel, which happened to be for an emerald cut stone, and now in part 2 I'm about to show you how to make the boxes for your side stones, which happen to be tapered baguettes. And then I'm going to show you how to go about attaching them to your center bezel. So if you haven't checked out part 1, make sure you do so you don't miss any of those steps, and once you're ready, let's get started on these side stone boxes. So the way I like to make my tapered baguette boxes is by starting with a plate filed to a rectangle that's the same length as your stone, and I make it slightly wider than the stone because we're going to make our marks and you want some room to work with when filing the outer shape with the angles to the shape of the stone. So what I do is I make marks on the bottom. If you can see these lines right there on the bottom, and I've made little marks on the top too. And then you file from one line to the other, and that'll give you the proper angle for the outer shape of your stone. And these boxes we're going to be making to the size of the stone. You don't need to make these smaller, and you don't want to make them bigger so you don't see metal from the top. So just to confirm, what I did is I measure the plate. It's about 330, say 335, 336. The top of our stone measures at 290, meaning it's about 0.30 to 0.40. You want to file off in total after measuring it this way. So you would end up marking 0.15 off of each side of your rectangle. Let's open up to 0.15. There. There. I like to do it on both sides, just so you know you filed all the way straight. And for the bottom, we do the same thing. But for the bottom, since it's smaller, we had to take off 0.5 millimeter. I'm going to leave it at 0.52 because one of the stones was even smaller. So just to keep it in that range, and then as you're filing, you just check, put your stone on top. We'll do it on the other side too. But there you have it. You see the lines on the bottom and the top. Now when you file from line to line, like I was saying before, it's going to create a little tapered baguette. So let's get started filing. The way I like to hold the plate is in a ring clamp. I just try to put it far enough to hold, not too far. We're gonna file your ring holder, and I like to use a nice big 0 file to really set a nice foundation and take off a lot of metal in one shot. You want to check to make sure you don't go over your lines and mess up your box. Try to file straight. You want your file marks to look nice and even. Getting pretty close. You also want to check this way to make sure your wall's not going crooked. So this side's almost there. Now I'm going to flip it around, get the other side close, then check with our stone and finalize. You could see one side already started taking the shape of the tapered baguette. We're right at that line. So now let's do the same to the other side. Again, file nice and straight. You could see the reflection shows you how straight you filed. That's what makes the difference between a beautiful looking ring and a cheap looking ring, the way the light reflects off of the polished surface. If you set a strong foundation now, all you got to do is continue to take these lines away until you reach the polishing stage, and your walls will look super pristine. If you file crooked, you're going to have to use sandpaper to fix it, and most likely you're not going to fix it because you wouldn't have filed crooked in the first place. So yeah, let's just figure it out for yourself. So you can see it's taking shape. You got to take maybe a little more off this side, but first let's check with the stone. I just got done filing these boxes from the outside. Now it looks like a tapered baguette. When you rest the stone on top, you just want to make sure the shape matches as much as possible and there isn't too much metal showing. Less metal is better than seeing metal. As much as you could see from this should rest right on top. What we're going to do next is draw some lines and start opening up the seat. So I'm about to show you that. What I'm about to do is basically draw a border all around the top at around 0.20, it's 0.22, it's fine. So we're going to draw a border all around. You could see that border, that's going to be the remaining wall. And I like to do it thin because I want to sit the stone as low as possible. So by doing that, you got to have a slanted seat and thin walls so the stone could sit low. And on the bottom, just like I showed you guys in part 1, while making the big center bezel, we got to draw lines for the azure at the bottom, which is obviously going to be wider than the top because the seat's going to be at a slant. So with this one, I'm going with 75 for this job. If it needs more afterwards, we'll take away. But you also don't want the bottom to be too thin so it stays strong. So like that at the bottom. So now we're gonna drill our hole and we're gonna start sawing the seat out, trying not to go past this border on the bottom to keep a nice shape, and that'll give us the angle of the seat which the stone is gonna sit on. And yeah, before we start drilling, I'm gonna make a little divot with this ball fraser just so the drill doesn't slip. And I like to make it from the bottom side because if you center it at the bottom, you're not really going to hit the border at the top because it's so wide. So I always start from the bottom and go to the top. So before drilling the actual hole, I soldered on these 2 pieces of wire on each end of the box. This is how I like to hold it in a pin vise, so you could shape it from the outside and comfortably hold it as you saw the box. So this one's already finished. Now I'm about to show you how to do that to get it to that point. So yeah, I'm about to drill the hole now, and then we proceed. So after drilling the hole, I like to open up the bottom azure first, because this will give clearance for your blade to work nicely at an angle when you saw it from the top. And it's just nice because then you don't end up creating a random shape on the bottom. You can see from the top where we've cut. So open this up with the saw. The shape doesn't have to be too great. Oops. The shape doesn't have to be too great at first because you might still hit it when sawing from the top. And that's when you go in with your file and you adjust it. So now I did this side, and now we're going to switch sides to the other wire and then finish sawing the other side. Now it's in from the other side, so you can just easily go in, finish sawing it. So there we have a nice rough cutout, and then now we flip it over and then cut our seat to the thinner line we previously made. So here's the bottom we just cut out, and then this is what I was mentioning before. Now when you go from the top, you have that cut out, and then you have just somewhere to start and move more freely to cut our main wall. So for this one, you want to hold your saw blade at more of an angle because you want it to create a slanted seat for the stone. So we go right to the end. Try to stay in your lines as best as you can because those were the marks that you made. Trying to keep this as clear as possible so you guys can see. But the angle I have to cut it is making it a little blurry. There we go. I'm going to switch it around because the frame keeps blocking the camera. Can't go as deep as I need to, but you get the idea. So let me just flip this around. Now I just flipped it to the other side of the wire, and then we're just going to go in the same way from the end. You could go in whichever direction feels comfortable for you. You just want to be able to create a nice seat. This also, we're going to go back in and adjust with a file. You don't really need to, but you can make it that much prettier if you care about that type of quality. A lot of people leave these boxes rough and don't open it all the way and seat the stone because they leave it for the setter. But as a jeweler, if you seat it properly, you control how your stones get set instead of the setter if you outsource your work. So you want to use your saw blade like a file and keep cutting on the same plane to make a nice smooth seat. You can see what we have so far. Check it out. Opening it up. Now I'm going to switch the wire back around and then just finish up the small side. You guys just got to bear with me if it gets a little blurry at this angle. But at this point I have to cut it from here. There it is. And now we just go in and do the tiny end. Okay, so as you can see, I've opened it up maybe to like 80% precision. Now I'm going to start going in with the file the same way I showed you for the center bezel. I'm going to use a small barrette file to do the big walls, and I'm going to use a tiny square file that I've shaped, custom shaped, to go and hit the small sides. If you guys are interested in custom shaping your files, I'll cover that in another video if anyone's interested. So now with the file, we're going to start going in and just shaping our wall to a nice even plane. I like to smooth everything out first with the file, and then check the stone once the box looks good, and then see what adjustments I need to make with the stone. Sorry if the camera is shaking a little. It's because the bench is shaking from the filing. Try to keep that clear looking. You can see the wall is becoming smoother and straighter. This isn't too necessary, but I like to do this just to make it even nicer. So basically, you get the idea. You're gonna finish up this side, do the other wall, and for the small side, I've custom shaped this square file, or this is a triangle file, to be able to fit into here, these areas. Same with the top. So now I do all the walls, I file the walls, and then I go in from the bottom like this, and then I start shaping my edge from the bottom just to get that shape crispy and nice. And then after you do that, once it's even, it'll make a little border on the bottom, and then you just go back in once more while seating your stone, and then just finalize everything, and you'll have a nice beautiful baguette box. I'll show you once more after it's finished. As you can see, I got my 2 baguette boxes filed, pretty much finalized. I tested it with the stone. When you test it with the stone, you just want to make sure there isn't too many gaps. So if there is a gap, you basically want to either saw or file from the segments where it's touching. Right now you can see it's a nice tight fit. There isn't many gaps. And we're still going to cast this in platinum, so I left it a little thicker than usual. Sometimes I go a little thinner to drop the stone lower, but this is still good. So there it is. For example, if you put the stone in and you see space along the long wall, that means you got to eat more and thin out the wall on the north and the south side. If there's gaps in the north and the south side and it's touching the sides, that means you got to file more from the sides and drop it to close the gaps. There it is. We're still going to sand this, but I haven't yet because we're about to put our wall, which we're going to set it with. The small sides are going to be tucked into the shank, and then over here there's going to be a 0.60, 0.50 millimeter wall. You could even use 0.40, and that's going to hold the stone on this side as opposed to prongs on this one. I got my 2 baguette boxes ready to go. Here is a strip of 0.60 millimeter metal, and what we're going to do is we're going to file 2 to 3/10 off of this box since it was the size of the stone. So now if we were to file that, you're going to have 2 to 3/10 of the stone overhanging over your box. So when you put this wall, basically this wall is 0.60, and if 2 or 3/10 go into this, you're basically going to groove half of this wall, fold it over your stone, and that's what's going to be holding your stone on the side that's not the shank. So now we're going to mark our baguette box's edge. I got about 3/10 opened up on the caliper. So I marked it there, you could see. I'm going to mark it all around, file that down, and then I'm going to show you how I put on the wall. You also want to make sure that your wall is straight this way. Well, every way, but especially this way, because you want the baguette to meet your wall at a 90-degree angle. I like to use a ring clamp to hold this little baguette box as I file. So now I'm just going to take 2/10 off of this. And then we continue. So I just used my laser to tack the boxes onto the wall. I like to do it like this because then I could just take my tweezers and then hold it from the center, place the solder on the extra metal, and then pull it right in. But I'll save the soldering for another segment because I don't want to take more time up than I already am showing you this process. So I'm going to solder this, then we're going to cut just enough wall. I leave it twice as long as the box, so like right to here. Then we're going to file the extra metal from the sides and the bottom and blend it in, and then yeah, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so as you can see, I blended the wall that we soldered on into the baguette box. So now it's all one unit. Bottom's blended, sides are blended, and that's the approximate height you want to go for to set it. So now basically we're going to attach our side stones to the center bezel that we made in part 1. So, you know, 3 stones have an angle to them. Now I'm going to show you how to get the center and start fitting your side stones into the center bezel. So now to get the center, we're going to measure this segment. It measured out to about 7.6. So we're going to bring our calipers to 3.8 to draw our center line. You could do this however you'd like. This is how I'm doing it. So we're going to draw the center line right there. Now we're going to make a crease with our saw blade. And the reason I like to do this is because you could put your calipers in here afterwards and draw the width of the baguette you gotta fit. So what I'm doing next is I'm measuring the width of the baguette. It measures 3.10. So I'm just gonna open up the calipers to 1.6. It's okay to go a little wider so you could stay within the lines while you fit your stone. So this is why I made the saw cut, to be able to go in and pull these lines right here. So now when you look at it, by the time I scoop all this out and file it down, you have a centered spot for your side stone. So if we check this out, right here, I left the lines just a little bit wider, and now I'm going to start filing to bring this in and fit it. The other thing I like to do is pull one more line at the bottom, just so I know where to stop filing, and the angles will match on both sides since you're going to the same line, and it's going to create the same angle. On the top it's already pretty thin, so usually I go right to the edge. That's my guide, so that your side stone gets as close to the center as you can get it, because this is the seat that the center is sitting on. So if you file right to this edge, you're going to get your side stone as close as you can with this style of a wall. Next, I just go in and start filing. I'm filing down at an angle to angle the side stones to meet that line I drew on the bottom. Alright guys, so I just finished up filing this little spot for our side stone box bezel. So now it fits into it straight, nice and tight, but we gotta obviously give it more of a severe angle. So you've run out of room on the bezel, so now you gotta take away from the side bezel. I'm going to show you how to do that, but also keep in mind it's important to file this as straight as you can, because that's going to determine how nicely and accurate your side stone bezel is going to sit against that wall. And you want to make sure you took the same amount off of both sides, so that the distances between the center and the side stones are equal on both sides. So to start taking away from your baguette box, what I do is I measure the thickness of the box, which is around 1.36 millimeters. I open up the caliper to that size, then I pull my first line. So this first line is basically at the same level as the top of your box, because when you file to here, that's going to be the edge that meets up with the center bezel, and the tops of your boxes are going to sit leveled. So technically, if you do it up to there, it's going to sit leveled once you take away from that corner. And since I'm doing 1.36 up there, I usually just do the same on the bottom unless it protrudes in to the edger. So yes, it does. So now I'm going to do a little bit less. So let's go 0.85 looks appropriate. Pull 0.85. And I like to do a more severe distance like 0.85, because even if I have to stop before, my line's already made in case I want to file a little bit more and give it a little bit more of an angle if it's not enough. Usually 45 degrees is a pretty good standard spot to shoot for, and then work your way from there for something like this. Just going to start filing and try to get close to those lines and start testing it with my center bezel. Now if you take a look, you could see that I filed from line to line. Now that corner is missing, and it creates the angle that we need to fit it into our bezel. So you could see, if I put this in now, it's sitting at this angle, which is a very pretty angle for these set of stones. So right there. And one way to check that you filed both of them precisely is to put them side by side and see that the facets are the same size, which will be obvious if you followed your lines. And if you did this step correctly, then you don't even really have to check your angles, because they'll be sitting at the same angle since you drew the same lines at the same measurements. And if you started off with a nice rectangle to make your box, it'll all just come together. That's why it's really important to do every step correctly and really take the time to make it precise, because then the next step will just fall into place. So now I'm going to put these on with the laser machine, tack them into place, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I got the side stones in. I haven't soldered them because I want you to see what a tight fit you could achieve. One way to check for precision is to put it down, and if the side stone boxes are touching the surface and the top looks leveled, it means the angles are pretty straight. Another way to see if the side stone boxes are not sitting cockeyed is by checking to see that the bottom edge is making full contact with the surface. You could see that both of these are making contact without any gaps. What I mean by that is if you take it, if it looked like it was sitting kind of like this, not that much, a little bit like that, you could see that little space. It shouldn't be sitting like that. It should be making full contact. So like that. And if you take a look, it should be a nice tight fit even before soldering, so you get clean results. One more thing I wanted to show you guys is this cool little angle tool that I've made. This one's 45 degrees. You basically rest the flat part on top of your bezel and then bring the angle close, and then you could see that you got a 45-degree angle. Then you flip it around and do the same to the other side. I've also made it in different angles. Here's 50. You can see, there it is. 55 on this side. I have shallower angles. And if you're wondering how I got this to stay in place before soldering, I tacked it with the laser machine. You could use plaster, you could use tweezers, whatever you'd like. So this concludes part 2. Stay tuned for part 3. Thank you for watching. See you guys soon.